Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories. The big sell-off in big tech, sparked by a Chinese AI disruptor you've never heard of.
And there's a knock-on impact on crypto markets, with Bitcoin falling below $100,000.
The long walk home. Hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinian families return to northern Gaza.
And Rwandan-backed M23 rebels take control of the largest city in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, prepare for disruption. The big names in artificial intelligence have taken a beating. There's a new kid on the block. US technology shares plunged in early trade on Wall Street as Chinese startup DeepSeek puts America's lead in AI in jeopardy. The company's emergence triggered a global sell-off, with shares of chip designer Nvidia slumping as much as 14%. DeepSeek's mobile app has overtaken ChatGPT to claim top spot on Apple's free app charts in both China and the United States.
No, I hadn't heard of them either. So who is this unheard-of Chinese company shaking up the world of artificial intelligence? Well, DeepSeek was founded just over a year ago by the hedge fund manager Liang Wenfeng. He's since sparked awe and panic in Silicon Valley after releasing artificial intelligence models that can rival the world's best chatbots for a fraction of the price. DeepSeek launched a free open source model last month, claiming it was developed in just 2 months at the cost of under $6 million, while United States companies spent billions. Its mobile app also sets itself apart from other chatbots like OpenAI's ChatGPT by articulating its reasoning before delivering a response to a prompt. And in a set of tests, DeepSeek's model outperformed comparable models from Meta, OpenAI and Anthropic in accuracy. That ranges from complex problem-solving to maths coding. Well, let's talk now to Angela Zeno, a Senior Vice President and Technology Equity Analyst at CFRA Research. Angela, good to see you. Well, first of all, look, no one had heard of this crowd, DeepSeek. Who are they? Why have they been so successful?
Yeah, I mean, listen, essentially DeepSeek is, from what most people would know of if they had heard of it, is they're this kind of China-based app platform, and essentially intended to compete with a number of Western counterparts out there, like an OpenAI out there. And they've actually been around for a couple of months in terms of the app being active, but over the last week they've kind of ramped up a reasoning, greater reasoning capabilities on the platform, and they've actually, kind of to your point, have kind of boosted themselves to kind of the top of the iOS store for Apple. But when you kind of think about what's made them so dangerous, one, it is the cost profile, and if what they claim is correct in terms of how low the cost point is, that creates a more competitive landscape. As you would imagine, more and more competitors enter and flood into the market, and then it puts some risk out there in terms of the price point and what have you. So that's a big threat out there for the OpenAIs and Anthropics of the world. And the other thing is, from a performance perspective, and we've been playing around with the app, it is essentially in par with these Western counterparts out there. So the lower price point plus kind of the good performance out there is, I think, what's spooking a lot of investors out there in other kind of AI-oriented names.
Well, you say spooked. I mean, DeepSeek has tanked global tech stocks, hasn't it? I mean, what are the implications for the broader AI industry? Is this just a flash in the pan, bad day in the office, or is this terminal?
I think it creates a lot of uncertainty out there, to be honest with you. I mean, clearly from a competitive landscape, that's something to think about. But I think the bigger concern out there in the market, at least today, is when you kind of look at the best performers out there in the market over the last 2 years, it has clearly been some of the high flyers on the semiconductor side of things. And when you think about, again, how little it cost on the China side of things to develop this model, I think there is definitely some fear out there about kind of whether or not we need to be spending as much as we are, or the likes of a Meta as well as Microsoft out there. I don't think they changed their spending patterns in 2025, but I think it does create some risk in the out years as we kind of go into 2026 and 2027. And because of that, I think the multiples start to compress on a lot of these stocks. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these names getting hit today. It's because of the uncertainty of those spending levels.
Semiconductors have been in the middle of geopolitical tensions for ages, and in the middle of tariffs and export bans and the rest of it. So what does this mean for those restrictions?
I mean, it remains to be seen, right? I mean, when we kind of think about just, what those restrictions currently in place, plus the increased concerns about privacy from having these models out there. I mean, when you think about DeepSeek, if you're a U.S. consumer and you're downloading that app like I have, you're essentially giving your information on China-based servers out there. We'll see if the U.S. administration decides to kind of further look into it or do anything about that. There are other apps as well, like a Red Note and what have you, from the shutdown of TikTok. So again, we'll kind of see what happens and what develops here over the coming months and quarters. But there are risks out there that are intensifying, and the U.S. government is going to have to look into all this. And we'll kind of see, again, as far as these trade restrictions are concerned, we think those probably remain in place at this moment, but we'll see what happens.
Angelo, good to see you. Thanks so much for that. Angelo Zeno, Senior Vice President and Technology Equity Analyst at CFRA Research.
Let's see how the markets are responding to this. John Territz, our correspondent on Wall Street. Hello there, John. So DeepSeek causing chaos, big market moves with these big tech sell-offs. It's also impacting the cryptocurrency markets, isn't it?
Sure is. I think the first thing to say about this, is that this is a real victory for China. Well done them, because if this is true, if this all pans out for DeepSeek, then they've gone and created this ChatGPT equivalent and these cheaper chips in the face of very, very severe restrictions from the Biden administration over the last 4 years. And being frank about it, the difficulty of getting hold of some of the commodities that you need to make these microchips. Water, for example, is scarce in parts of China, and you need water to make these microchips. But I will tell you, from Wall Street's perspective, it brings into very, very sharp relief the sort of concern that Wall Street has about investing in these Chinese ADRs that trade here. These are Chinese companies that trade in America under the tag ADR, American Depository Receipts. So Wall Street is nervous about investing in them, and just this kind of thing is why. Because on Friday, nobody here had ever heard of DeepSeek. Okay, now I want to be absolutely clear with you. That is partially true, all right? I hadn't heard of them. Most of the people on the floor hadn't heard of the company. There are specialist journalists who do nothing but this kind of stuff all the time who do know about them. And, of course, I think Meta Platforms has had some sort of relationship. But basically, they've gone in the space of 2 days from being a company no one in the West had ever heard of to dominating the international headlines and bringing down the global markets. Now, DeepSeek is a startup. It's based in Zhejiang in Hangzhou. And the buzz began over the weekend. And the buzz is that if they have really done this, really produced this equivalent to ChatGPT using much, much, much cheaper AI chips, then we have to reevaluate the high value of all the companies here like NVIDIA and Broadcom, which have been going up in value in the last couple of years based on their AI development. And NVIDIA, you must remember, their chips cost somewhere between $10,000 and $40,000 per chip, and you're going to need thousands of these things if you're going to have a data center. Well, apparently DeepSeek can do it much, much cheaper. So we will see. But that's forced this huge big tech sell-off over here. It calls into question the value of the Magnificent Seven, of course, and all of this just as the Magnificent Seven have begun announcing massive, what we call CapEx spending into AI projects. Now, they did a lot in 2024. They're promising to do even more, or they were, in 2025. So it's a challenge to Microsoft and Meta and all of that. However, as always, there's a caveat and questions to be raised. Number one question is, this is the only data point we've got. All we have is DeepSeek's word. And we can't look into their books. We can't see behind the DeepSeek curtain. So that's a problem. Also, the question is, will anyone actually buy the DeepSeek product? Will they go for it? They may not. Also, how is it actually going to be used, and how accurate is it? My understanding is it's very, very similar to ChatGPT, and you can switch between the two if you want to very, very super easily. But how accurate is it? That's going to be the thing that people will be most interested in. Anyway, all of this has happened. We have a huge tech sell-off going on at the moment. The Dow is it was worse earlier. The Dow is now down 29 points. The S&P 500 down 1.5%. The Nasdaq was down 5% earlier on, a full 5%. It's now down 2.4%. And I've got the Magnificent Seven here, which I think is probably worth running through just quickly. So Tesla down 0.7%, Meta down 1.3%, Alphabet down 3%, Amazon down 3%, Nvidia down 12% now, was down 14%, Microsoft down 4%, and Apple up 2%. Hang on a minute, how is that possible? Why is Apple up? Well, the answer is, of course, Apple has yet to introduce its sort of ChatGPT AI type chips to China. So now, and remember where these iPhones are made, in China, now will Apple go for this DataSeek version, or will it go for something more expensive over here? I know where my money is, and that's where Wall Street's money is right now, which is why Apple is up. But overall, the issue here is the value now of the big tech companies that we have in America, the very, very famous names. And Bitcoin, as you rightly say, has been affected as well. It was below 100,000 earlier on, but in keeping with the stocks, it's now back up a bit at 101,000 per token.
And John, just going back to the Magnificent Seven, 4 of them are posting earnings this week, aren't they? What can we expect, bearing in mind those stock prices you just mentioned?
I know. No, I know. It's incredible, really, that this should happen at this time. I mean, there is going to be an AI war, okay, if that's the correct way to put it, and this is the beginning of it, so you should bear that in mind. So the Magnificent Seven are looming. Wall Street's looking for 22% growth this time round. That is the lowest since 2023, however. It's probably going to be even lower in the first quarter now as they go forward. We'll see. So the Magnificent Seven spent $200 billion in 2024. They're expecting to spend even more than that, as I hinted just now, in 2025. On Wednesday, it's Microsoft, Meta, and we'll hear from Tesla as well. Then on Thursday, we hear from Apple. That's always a really big one. And we also hear from Intel, one of the chip makers. And then next week, it's Alphabet and Amazon. And then Nvidia. We don't actually hear from Nvidia, which is the company we all probably want to hear from now, until February. So that's quite a way to wait. So a lot could happen between now and February.
John Terrett in New York, thank you so much.
China's manufacturing activities fell in January. The Purchasing Managers' Index, or PMI, dropped a point from December to 49.1. A reading below 50 represents contraction. Officials have attributed the fall to the Spring Festival holiday as workers take a break to go home. Europe should rely on independent gas supplies and resist pressure to re-establish business links with Russia. That's the message from Poland's President, Andrzej Duda, who said the Nord Stream gas pipelines from Russia should be dismantled after not being used in nearly 3 years. President Duda insisted economic sanctions imposed on Moscow for the Ukraine conflict were working. Ryanair is reporting after-tax profits of $156 million for the 3 months to December, more than double expectations. However, the budget airline cut its passenger traffic forecast for the second time in 3 months amid concern on the delivery of new Boeing aircraft, which might be delayed. The airline says it expects 9 Boeing 737 MAX aircraft before the summer, which is fewer than expected.
Well, you can now have your new Range Rover painted to match your private jet, Jamie. Jaguar Land Rover is to invest over $80 million to expand its paint services. The company is planning new facilities in the UK and Slovakia to cope with an expected doubling of demand for bespoke paint jobs for wealthy clients. It follows a similar move by Rolls-Royce this month. British retailer WH Smith is looking to sell off its high street stores to focus on its travel unit. The 232-year-old retailer said it was exploring options for its 520 profitable stores which sell toys, games, books and stationery. WH Smith's travel business now accounts for more than 85% of its profit. And banking group UBS is reportedly in the process of laying off hundreds of employees. It's part of the group's efforts to cut its workforce after integrating former rival Credit Suisse, which it acquired in an emergency rescue in 2023. Those affected received notice in the last few weeks.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the emotional return. Hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians head back home to northern Gaza.
Chinese paper cutting, known as jianzhe, is thought to have originated during the 6th century CE. However, some believe that its history could be traced back further. Usually the artworks are made of red paper, as the colour red is associated with festivities and luck in Chinese culture. Cut paper artwork is used as a way of decorating doors and windows during festivals such as Chinese New Year and weddings, symbolising good wishes and happiness. The common tools used in Chinese paper cutting are scissors or an engraving knife. Yin and Yang are the two main techniques used in paper cutting. Yin refers to the process of cutting out a defined shape, whereas Yang refers to cutting out the negative space around that shape. Works are mainly divided into southern and northern styles. The southern style utilises fine and precise cuts to create intricate lace-like patterns, showcasing themes from nature such as plants and animals. The northern style is known for its exaggerated shapes and vigorous designs, emphasising strong lines, symmetry and contrast, and often features themes from Chinese mythology and historical figures. Today, paper cutting is one of the most popular folk arts in China.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe.
In Gaza, hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians are walking home to the north for the first time in the 15-month conflict.
Israel opened the coastal route of Wadi Gaza after Hamas agreed to hand over 3 Israeli hostages later this week following an earlier dispute. The United Nations claims northern Gaza is among the worst damaged part of the enclave, with nearly 3/4 of the buildings destroyed.
We're going to see our families. I want to see my mother and father. I haven't seen them for 15 months. It's been a long time waiting to see them. We're on our way.
I'm very happy to be back in our land, our homeland, and to Gaza City. A salute to everyone who fought with us, and to everyone who supported us and extended us a helping hand. It's true that we suffered, but in the end, we were victorious.
Our correspondent Rami Al-Magari reports from Gaza City.
Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have walked down actually since the early morning towards the Gaza City and northern Gaza Strip. And this was a challenge for them because the road from the central Gaza Strip, a Rashid Road, coastal road, towards Gaza City was very long and unpaved, at all unpaved. Holes in the road, destruction, every part of the road there is a destruction. Yes, widespread destruction actually, and holes in the road itself, and the people have had difficulties going and walking down towards Gaza City. We were a part of those people who walked down in Gaza City, and we are now in the heart of Gaza City, in Al Rimal neighborhood, for the first time since the war has broken out against Gaza or against the Islamist Hamas party in October of 2023. So the road was very difficult for the population, especially for women and children. I myself have seen a number of people falling down because of the bricks of the holes in the road. We were walking down very carefully. And despite these difficulties and hardships during the walk down towards Gaza and northern Gaza Strip, we can say that this is a remarkable moment for the Palestinians who have been forcibly displaced from homes, from towns in northern Gaza Strip neighborhoods in Gaza City. The first time they enter back to the Gaza City, to the northern Gaza, since the war has begun. And actually, despite whatever being said that this is something that Israel may have not wanted, but we can say that this is a part of the agreement that has been signed between Israel and Hamas through mediations in Qatar, in Doha. And this ceasefire or truce deal will continue to have other aspects, especially next week when there will be a release of several Israeli hostages in return for the release of other Palestinians from the territory, and the talks for the other Palestinians who are jailed in Israel.
Well, the return of tens of thousands of Palestinians to northern Gaza has been described by some as a total surrender by Israel. The far-right former National Security Advisor and Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who quit the government over the terms of this ceasefire, urged Israel to return to war. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev is in Tel Aviv.
As far as Ben-Gvir is concerned, the fact that hundreds of thousands of Gazans are going back to the northern Gaza Strip, while Hamas may be severely hit, but still on its feet, and we could see a lot of Hamas militants in those videos coming out of Gaza. That for Ben-Gvir is source of defeat, and he's saying that Israel should not have agreed to anything less than wiping out Hamas altogether. How can you do that? How can you wipe an organization altogether? I'm not exactly sure, but this is what Itamar Ben-Gvir was asking. There's a lot of criticism on Ben-Gvir here in Israel, not necessarily because people do not agree with his opinions. There are quite a lot of people who do, but Ben-Gvir, like many other politicians, practically many other people, published some very happy tweets last Saturday when 4 more hostages returned to Israel. People are blaming Ben-Gvir for hypocrisy. They're saying, on the one hand, you're now tweeting this happy message when the hostages came back. On the other hand, you were perhaps the most vocal opponent of this deal. If Israel would have listened to you, then those hostages would still be in Gaza and fighting would still be on. This is what the critics of Ben-Gvir are saying. As far as he's concerned, this war should have continued, and Gazans should have not been allowed to go back to the northern Gaza Strip. Even those who oppose Ben-Gvir are well aware that Israel will not be able to stop the smuggle of ammunition altogether to the northern to the northern Gaza Strip. There's practically no checkpoints along the coastal route through which people walk back to the north. And it is, I think it is quite clear for everyone in Israel that ammunition is smuggled there, that Hamas will be able to recuperate to some extent in the northern Gaza Strip. Of course, the reward for Israel from all of this is that 7 female hostages are already back home. 6 more are meant to return up until Saturday. So by the end of this week, possibly 13 hostages, living hostages, will be back home. That's a very big reward for Israel, but also there's a very big price. The fact that the Gazans are returning, the fact that weapons are being smuggled to the northern Gaza Strip, and the fact that many prisoners are being released from prisons, many of them serving life sentences, many of them convicted of killing many Israelis.
Jonathan, I just should explain while you're speaking, we're watching pictures of hundreds of Palestinians walking home to the north. Let me ask you about hopes for a ceasefire and that holding north of Israel's border.
So first we can say that the ceasefire has been extended until February 18th, meaning 3 more weeks of a ceasefire. These are agreements between Israel, Lebanon, and the Trump administration, which is heavily involved in this. How much faith is there in Israel on the ceasefire? Maybe the answer comes from the call of community leaders in the north, telling their residents not to come back home yet, saying that the situation is simply not safe enough. The community leaders are saying that the Lebanese army is not doing what it has to do. It is not deploying enough forces. It is not kicking away up north of the Litani River the Hezbollah infrastructure, the Hezbollah personnel, and we are already seeing people coming back to the villages, many of them waving Hezbollah flags. It is quite clear that they're bringing weapons with them, some of them bringing weapons to places which are very close to the Israeli border. So not a lot of faith, I have to say, in the ceasefire when it comes to Israel. Simply, Israel says at the moment we cannot trust the Lebanese army to do what it has to do according to the agreement. The Lebanese army has some connections with Hezbollah. It has already been proven in the past, according to Israeli sources. Will this bring Israel back into war? That, of course, is not exactly clear. The answer to that may be in Washington. Eventually, it is the Trump administration putting a lot of pressure on Israel, both on this front and on the Gazan one, not to return to war. Will it be enough? We'll have to wait a little bit more to find out.
You're watching CGTN, still ahead. 80 years on, commemorations in Poland to mark the liberation of Auschwitz, where more than 1 million people were killed by the Nazis.
Tradition, trade and culture have connected Europe and China for hundreds of years.
In the 18th century, a small number of products escaped from China and lit a touch paper in the West of excitement.
In this special series, we'll uncover the intertwined social and cultural histories of Europe and China, from the ancient Silk Road to the modern era.
Art is traveling as a silent ambassador to spread the word about culture and civilization.
It's amazingly impressive because they were such incredibly talented artists.
When you talk about silk, with the value of 3 or 4 garments, you could buy a palace.
We'll be seeking out the European spaces where traces of China lie hidden in plain sight.
Wow!
This is the Chinese room, and it's definitely one of my favorites within the house.
How do you feel about snakes? Well, in 2025, hundreds of millions of people across the world will be celebrating the Year of the Snake, and they may see things differently. Snakes are a recurring symbol in many creation myths. In the Christian tradition, the most familiar serpent appears in the biblical story of Adam and Eve. Tempted by Satan in the form of snake, they eat fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. As a result, God banishes them from the Garden of Eden and curses the snake. This serpent is often seen as a symbol of evil, but also of knowledge. Meanwhile, in Chinese mythology, Nuwa, a snake with a woman's head, is credited with creating humanity. According to legend, Nuwa shaped the first humans from yellow clay. As she grew tired, she dipped a rope into the mud and swung it round. The blobs that fell became common people, while the handcrafted figures became the nobility. That was a bit unfair, wasn't it? And across different cultures, snakes are also considered symbols of immortality. They have been observed biting their own tails to form a circle, and their coiled bodies often resemble spirals. This symbolism appears in Egyptian, Hindu, and Norse mythologies. Curiously, snakes are also closely linked to medicine. The ancient Greek god of medicine, Asclepius, is often depicted with a staff entwined by a serpent, a symbol still seen in medical logos today. So, whatever you feel about snakes before, be ready to see them in a new light. Happy Year of the Snake.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Paul Barber. Our top stories. The big sell-off in big tech sparked by a Chinese AI disruptor you've never heard of.
And there's a knock-on impact on crypto markets, with Bitcoin falling below $100,000.
And the long walk home. Hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinian families return to northern Gaza.
Rwanda-based M23 rebels in the Democratic Republic of Congo say they've captured the key city of Goma.
The Congolese military says the Rwandan army is present in Goma and it's working to avoid what it called carnage. Our correspondent Siobhan McCall reports.
Gunfire rings out in Goma. M23 rebels were filmed patrolling the streets of the city after a lightning offensive. The advance continued despite the United Nations Security Council demanding a halt. At that meeting, the DRC's top diplomat accused Rwanda of sending more troops over the border.
The signs are clear. Rwanda is preparing to orchestrate open-air carnage with a brutality reminiscent of the darkest hours of our history. It is imperative that the fighting stops immediately.
Rwanda has previously denied backing the M23 rebels and told the UN that the crisis could have been averted had the DRC government demonstrated a genuine commitment to peace. M23 was formed in 2012 and the name refers to a peace accord that was signed on March 23, 2009. It says the government has failed to fully implement Congolese people from the Tutsi ethnic group into the army and administration. Goma is a key trading and transport hub and the regional capital of the mineral-rich east of the country. Around 2 million people live there. While many have already fled, others have vowed to stay put despite the danger.
Sitting here, I can hear the sound of bombs, the crackle of falling bullets. We decided to stay at home because as long as there are wars, those who flee the war can also die or live a bad life. If we're going to die, it's better to die here.
The city's significance has raised fears in the international community of a widening conflict.
France expresses its solidarity with the DRC and its territorial integrity. France strongly condemns the offensive led by the M23, supported by the Rwandan armed forces. The fighting must stop and dialogue must resume.
Kenya has called for a ceasefire and President William Ruto says East African leaders will meet to find a solution to the growing conflict. Both Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwandan leader Paul Kagame have agreed to attend. 25 million people in the DRC already require humanitarian assistance, and there is growing concern that this latest offensive could dramatically escalate a humanitarian crisis that is already one of the worst in the world. Siobhan McCall, CGTN.
Our correspondent Chris Okumringa is in Kinshasa.
Well, local residents in the city of Goma in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo said that they saw a number of M23 rebels marching in their town earlier this morning. And they said that the rebels urged them to remain calm. They told them that they have liberated the city, which is the capital of North Kivu province, an area that is rich in minerals like gold and coltan. And very many people are afraid, are living in fear because of this new development. The government has, the Minister of Communication, Patrick Muyaya, issued a statement saying that they have noticed a very large number of Rwandan troops in that area who are fighting alongside the M23 rebels. He said President Felix Tshisekedi ordered the army not to fight the rebels because of the large population of civilians in that area. And they also told them against engaging in acts of vandalism. But there's a number of crisis meetings that are being held by authorities in Kinshasa, trying to see how they can resolve that conflict. The government has not explicitly said that the city of Goma has fallen into the hands of the M23 rebels, but the rebels have issued a statement saying that that is the situation right now. And because of this new development, there's a number of protests that have broken out in the capital, Kinshasa, and other parts of other provinces in eastern DRC. People burning tires, complaining about this situation that, you know, is escalating and is threatening conflict between the DRC and Rwanda.
In Sudan, the government is encouraging people who fled Al Jazeera state and the city of Omdurman to return to their homes after the Sudanese army reclaimed areas previously held by the Rapid Support Forces.
Dozens of buses are ferrying those who want to return from the city of Port Sudan. Our correspondent Sharon Barana reports.
Many Sudanese fled their homes in Khartoum, Omdurman and Al Jazeera when fighting between the army and the Rapid Support Forces intensified in 2023. Most of them have been staying in the Red Sea city of Port Sudan since then. But the situation in areas they were forced to flee from has improved in recent weeks, following a string of battlefield victories for the Sudanese army. The government is now helping them to move back to safer regions in Al Jazeera state and Omdurman city. The first trips heading that way started on Saturday. The voluntary return program of resettling the internally displaced persons is sponsored by the Sudanese government. It has been welcomed by many people.
As for the return program, I feel overwhelming joy, ecstasy and great hope to return to our areas, as the enemy that loomed over us has ended and left our areas.
We went through many places during our displacement period. We came from Al-Bakir area in Al Jazeera state, then Al-Kamlin, then Wad Al-Zaki, passing through Fadasi, then Madani, then Kazala state, and now we're in Port Sudan. We spent a whole year under trees in the streets waiting. We were affected by diseases and our entire families were scattered. Some of our brothers sought refuge outside Sudan, and some of us are still here. All the misfortunes of time befell us. I have lost 3 brothers.
The local travel bus chamber is planning 25 bus trips from the Red Sea city to the city of Madani in Al Jazeera state. This is in addition to 70 other trips being organized by the Red Sea state government for Al Jazeera state citizens through the voluntary return project.
We are happy to send our people and guests in the Red Sea state, specifically in Port Sudan, to Omdurman. Our happiness has increased with the victories of the armed forces, and we take this opportunity to congratulate the Sudanese people on this occasion for the joyful, happy and great victories achieved on all levels and combat axis. We are truly happy with this partnership with our brothers in the Omdurman Call Organization, the Bus Chambers Union, and all the supporters of this initiative to send our people to Omdurman.
The voluntary return program has been made possible after the Sudanese army expanded its control over Al Jazeera state, including the city of Wad Madani and large areas in the east and south, while the northwestern part remains under Rapid Support Forces control.
We started this initiative a while ago, since last year October, in the National Committee for the Return of Citizens, and we have been able to return many of the people of Omdurman to their areas. Currently, we have started in the states and from the Red Sea state. Our next stop will be the River Nile state in the city of Atbara.
Even though a number of internally displaced persons in Sudan are excited to return home, they will still face many challenges when they eventually relocate. This is because people in safer states are struggling due to high inflation that has affected their daily lives, raising the cost of essential goods and rent to unprecedented levels. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
The Colombian government has agreed to receive U.S. military flights carrying deported migrants in order to prevent a trade war. On Sunday, the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, barred the planes from landing amid objections over the treatment of the returnees. This prompted the Trump administration to threaten to impose tariffs.
Mexico is also following President Trump's deportation orders with interest. Hundreds of suspected undocumented migrants have been arrested in the US, while millions more are now expected to follow the same fate. Our correspondent Alistair Baverstock reports on how Mexico is preparing.
Repeat after me.
From day one of his second term, Donald Trump had a plan for undocumented immigrants in America.
We will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came.
Muy buenos días.
On day two, his Mexican counterpart unveiled a plan of her own, named Mexico Te Abraza, or Mexico Embraces You, focused on reintegrating returning Mexican nationals into society.
In case these deportations occur, how will we receive our fellow Mexicans with all the support that they will need and with the embrace that they deserve from their country?
Deportees will be offered access to welfare programs, temporary lodging, help with their Mexican ID, other paperwork and transportation back to their places of origin. Across the border from California, Tijuana receives around 40% of total US daily deportations. Now the city is preparing for the expected surge. It's here at this Tijuana shopping centre that local authorities plan to house deportee arrivals. 15 kilometres from the port of entry, this building has the capacity to house more than 1,800 people. Nevertheless, local organisations here say the influx may still be too much to handle. Pat Murphy runs one of Tijuana's longest-standing migrant shelters.
There will be 1,000 people along the border deported every day, and Tijuana immigration said we could process 400 a day. Where are they going to put them? It's not just one day a week, it's every day, and we won't know what to do with them.
And while border city governments might turn to already existing migrant shelters, Mexican federal funding to independent aid organisations was eliminated in 2019, leaving many shelters in Tijuana and elsewhere struggling to cover rising costs.
Good intentions need to be paved with good construction, and that means supporting those who are already doing the work. We've been doing this for 38 years. I think we know what we're doing. I think they need to support us. There's over 30 shelters in Tijuana. We just heard recently one is closing because they have no funding.
As record deportee volumes loom at the US-Mexico border, Tijuana is bracing itself to embrace them. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Tijuana, Mexico.
The Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has been declared the winner of the country's presidential election, extending his 31-year rule by 5 more years. Electoral officials said he secured more than 86% of votes in Sunday's election. The EU's foreign policy chief described the election as an affront to democracy. Lukashenko is a close ally of Russia's President Vladimir Putin. South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol has been charged with insurrection after his attempt to declare martial law in December. He's the first sitting president in the country's history to be charged with a crime and, if convicted, could face prison. Separately, the Constitutional Court has begun deliberations on whether to formally dismiss or reinstate Yoon as president.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called for more communications between China and India. Wang's comment came during a meeting with his Indian counterpart Vikram Misri in Beijing. Last October, China and India agreed to repair ties at a meeting between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi in Russia. Both sides reached an agreement to ease tension in the disputed border region. Investigators say they found evidence of a bird strike on a passenger plane that crashed in South Korea last month, killing 179 people. A preliminary report revealed DNA collected on both engines of the Jeju Airjet belonged to a duck. The inquiry into South Korea's worst aviation disaster will now focus on the role of a bird strike and a concrete structure at the end of the runway.
A memorial service is being held in Poland to mark 80 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp. World leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, are at the official event, as well as around 50 survivors. Nazi forces murdered more than 1 million people, most of them Jews, at the camp in Poland, which was under German occupation during the Second World War.
Poland takes care of these sites in order to protect the memory, to keep it alive, so people always remember. And so through this remembrance, the world never again lets such a dramatic human catastrophe happen. To be more precise, a catastrophe of humanity.
Our correspondent Alyosha Malenkovich is at Auschwitz. Alyosha, the few remaining survivors are now very elderly. Presumably this is being widely treated as the last major gathering.
You're absolutely right, Jamie. As you mentioned, around 50 survivors are gathered here today in Auschwitz concentration camp, which is right behind me. 5 years ago, during the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, it was around 300 survivors. And the fact is that they are saying that they are aware of the biology and that it is nature and inevitability of what is coming, and they would like the legacy of their memory to be kept by the generations to come. We had opportunity to speak with one of the survivors just a couple of days ago, so let's hear just brief statements, brief testimony of his ordeal he went through during his 1 year in Auschwitz.
I saw more than just gassing victims. When we were in camp, we were at the square next to the barracks every morning, where we had to sit all day. Right next to us, by the wall, there was a pile of murdered and dead prisoners, arranged 5 on top of each other, heads to one side, so that when they came out to count us during roll call, they could also count exactly how many prisoners had been murdered. For several weeks, we literally had to sit 1 or 2 steps away from these murdered prisoners.
And of course, the commemoration is closing, I think, any minute now, because just before the main event was here that 3 of the survivors actually spoke at the commemoration event right behind us, and they were remembering about those horrifying events which at the end, after 5 years of existence of Auschwitz, killed almost 1.1 million people. Most of them were Jews, and the rest of them were actually taken from all over Europe. It was Nazi industrial style killing machine, the Auschwitz concentration camp, which killed people in masses. But anyway, this was 80th anniversary with 54 foreign delegations actually attending it.
Alyosha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic at Auschwitz.
You're watching CGTN, still ahead. China on the move. Billions of trips by train, plane and automobile ahead of the Spring Festival holiday.
In the 18th century, a small number of products escaped from China and lit a touch paper in the West of excitement.
It's amazingly impressive because they were such incredibly talented artists.
When you talk about silk, with a value of 3 or 4 garments, you could buy a palace.
Art is traveling as a silent ambassador to spread the word about culture and civilization.
Well, to the Chinese people, Happy New Year, Happy Year of the Snake. I wish you well. I wish you happiness. I wish you prosperity.
My name is Andrej Plenković. I'm the Prime Minister of Croatia, and I would like to congratulate the Chinese New Year, Year of the Snake, and wish everybody a lot of health, love, and all the best.
I'm Mirjana Špoljević. I'm the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross. I wish you a happy Year of the Snake.
I am Ahmed Al-Khatib, the Saudi Minister of Tourism. I wish the Chinese a happy New Year.
I am Belen Garijo, the CEO of Merck, and I wanted to take this opportunity to wish all of you a very happy Chinese New Year, a very happy New Year of the Snake.
My name is Achim Steiner. I head the United Nations Development Program. And on the happy occasion of China's New Year, I wish you all a very happy New Year, the Year of the Snake.
I'm Sania Nishtar, the CEO of Gavi, and I would like to wish you a very happy New Year of the Snake.
I wish you good health, happiness, and prosperity in the Year of the Snake.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. China's transport networks are being put to the test as millions of people head off for Spring Festival holidays.
More than 250 million trips were made on Monday. That's up more than 8% on last year. Our correspondent Huang Ye reports.
Good evening from Beijing South Railway Station, one of the busiest transportation hubs during the Spring Festival travel rush, also known as Chunyun in Chinese. And since tomorrow is the Chinese New Year's Eve, you can see the station behind me. The station is still bustling with the travelers eager to head home for the family reunions. And many of them are carrying not only their suitcases or baggage, but also bags filled with festive goods goods to share with their families. And the excitement is written all over their faces as they hurry home to celebrate this most important traditional Chinese festival with their loved ones. And high-speed trains departing from this station connect to major cities including East China's Shanghai, Suzhou, Hangzhou, and Nanjing. So you can see all these are big cities and also popular tourist destinations, and that's why this station is always a hive of activity. And earlier I've learned from the station's management that this year during the 40-day Spring Festival Travel Rush, the Beijing South Railway Station is expected to handle over 6 million passengers with an average of over 155,000 passengers every day. And that's an increase of over 10% compared to last year, likely setting a new record for the Spring Festival travel season. And zooming out to the national scale, on Sunday, China saw more than 14 million passengers traveling by rail. However, China's Meteorological Authority earlier announced that a cold wave will result in the most extensive and intense snowfall of this winter thus far in China, impacting the travel rush. And heavy snows have been reported in some parts of Henan and Shanxi provinces, while strong winds and also plummeting temperature affecting much of central and eastern China. In response, many railway stations in China have stepped up efforts to ensure the efficiency and safety. For example, tracks and platforms are being cleared of snow and ice as quickly as possible, and inspections and maintenance of equipment have been intensified. Heating facilities are being closely monitored to keep travelers warm, and also anti-slip mats and signs have been placed in key areas to prevent accidents.
Australian lobsters are heading back to China once again after a 4-year absence.
The fishing industry says the removal of a trade ban by China late last year has opened the doors to its biggest and most profitable export destination just in time for Chinese New Year.
Our correspondent Greg Navarro has the story.
The haul on this day was a good one for Basil Lenzo and his crew. About 400 kilos of Western Rock lobsters. What's even more significant for the third-generation fisher is that much of this catch will end up in China.
Very pleased to be back in, and very good for the fishing families around Western Australia.
In 2019, about 95% of Australia's Western Rock lobsters were sent to China, which was the industry's most profitable export market, worth more than 700 million Australian dollars. The next year, China imposed tariffs and trade blockages on a number of Australian exports, including lobsters. The move was seen in response to Australia's former government calling for an international investigation into the origins of COVID-19.
It's been very hard. I mean, the impact of not having China, especially through COVID, was a 50% reduction in economic activity, right? And that resulted in fishers leaving the industry. Through that period, but those who stayed and have weathered the storm have really been treading water.
Late last year, China lifted the trade ban on Australian lobsters. The timing is providing a much-needed boost for the industry.
We're seeing this inflated demand because of the Lunar New Year and the celebrations, and the customers that we've spent generations building in China, they're of course coming back in droves now, which is good, along with a whole bunch of new customers that we hadn't dealt with previously. So this news has certainly been welcomed as much, I think, in China as it has been for our fishers here in Australia.
That increased demand is evident in this Perth facility, where all Western Rock lobsters destined for live exports are processed.
The scale of this operation is quite incredible. 80 tons of lobsters sitting in about 140 tons of water. And keep in mind, a single catch weighs about half a kilo.
Industry officials say it's too early to tell whether China's current demand will extend beyond the New Year period.
One thing that this has been able to do for us is over the last 4 years, we've really focused on diversifying our markets. We sold to 22 international markets last year out of these premises, which was great.
For now, Lenzo is happy to be busy again.
You get money to put in a new engine, you get money to build a new boat down the track, and you get money to, feed your families and keep your crew.
And Lenzo says the return to business helps sustain an industry that so many communities depend on along Australia's western coast. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Perth.
Chinese New Year is celebrated by communities all around the world, including the United States.
The festival has been an official holiday for New Yorkers since 2016. Our correspondent Karina Mitchell reports from Chinatown.
Lunar New Year celebrations are in full swing, and about 2 billion people all over the world are expected to celebrate, including right here in New York, and especially in Manhattan, Chinatown, where I am right now. So no wonder then that all of the stores and markets are full of festive decorations, treats, and goodies, including this particular tea shop where we have a local monk. He's doing a tea tasting, local free teas by donation as well. Let's take a look inside. This store is called Grand Tea Imports. It's been on the scene for almost 2 decades and in fact has become somewhat of a cultural landmark in the store. A lot of people, tourists and locals, come in to get what they need to help celebrate the Lunar New Year. We're lucky to be joined by Alice, the second-generation owner. Alice, thanks for having us in.
Thank you.
Show us some of the popular decorations. What's this?
This is a prosperity tray. We fill it with candy, sweets, and nuts so that we can start the year off sweetly. These are blessings all in the year of snake, on theme for the year of the snake. They have lucky blessings on them, like may you have a happy year, or have good health.
And I know these very well.
Yes, these are our year of the snake envelopes. We filled them with money. Adults fill them with money to give to children or unmarried folks yet. And yeah, these are all blessings that we wish to impart on them.
These are very cute. The closest I want to get to a snake. I like those.
They're pretty, right? We can make snakes pretty.
And of course, we can't forget all of the amazing tea that we see here. It is on full display, every single kind you can imagine. Such a wonderful place to come into, and we're so lucky to be joined not only by Alice, but the first-generation owner, is a monk as well, as here, and they have a very special greeting for our audience.
新年快乐，恭喜发财，新年快乐，恭喜发财。Happy New Year!
Happy New Year! Thank you so much. So you can see a lot of festive activity here in Chinatown. Karina Mitchell, CGTN, New York.
The headlines again. The big sell-off in big tech sparked by a Chinese AI disruptor you've never heard of.
And there's a knock-on impact on crypto markets, with Bitcoin falling below $100,000.
And Rwandan-backed M23 rebels take control of the largest city in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
And that is it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.